There's a question people often ask about growing up. At what age does peer pressure actually stop? Most of us assume it fades after high school or maybe college, but sometimes the biggest examples of it happen among celebrities who are fully grown adults. And recently, a series of leaked text messages involving Blake Lively and best-selling author Colleen Hoover has sparked a strange conversation online. Because when you read those messages closely, the dynamic between them raises some very uncomfortable questions about influence, loyalty, and how decisions behind a major movie adaptation were really being made. To understand why these texts are getting attention, you have to remember the context surrounding the film adaptation of It Ends With Us. The movie was based on Colleen Hoover's massively popular novel, and Justin Baldoni was the person who originally pushed to turn that book into a film project. He directed the movie and played a key role in getting the adaptation moving. Meanwhile, Blake Lively became the lead actress and a major creative voice attached to the production. What should have been a straightforward collaboration eventually turned into a complicated situation behind the scenes, and the messages that surfaced give a small window into how those relationships were unfolding privately. One of the most talked about exchanges reportedly began on May 19, 2024, when Colleen Hoover texted Blake Lively while traveling. Hoover mentioned she was already being contacted by companies like Wayfair Studios, the production company connected to Justin Baldoni, and she also explained she had recently signed with a film agent connected to UTA. The conversation at first looked completely ordinary, two people discussing meetings, travel plans, and future opportunities connected to the movie. Hoover even sent a photo of an empty living room in Vancouver where she was staying at the time, casually chatting with Lively about locations and life updates. But as the conversation continued, something more interesting started to appear in the messages. Hoover began talking about watching different versions of the film, including edits that had been shared through producer Josh Greenstein, a studio executive who had been introduced to her through Blake Lively. Hoover seemed extremely enthusiastic about the version connected to Lively's influence, and her reaction was dramatic. According to the messages, she claimed she had made a list of 57 things she liked better in that version compared to another cut she had seen. That number alone caught people's attention. 57 separate improvements is an oddly specific claim, and it immediately made observers curious about what exactly those differences were. Hoover described watching the film versions side by side and said the improvements she noticed confirmed that earlier creative decisions had been the right ones. She also mentioned how difficult it had been to focus during theater screenings because of nerves and distractions, implying that a private viewing made the differences clearer to her. When Blake Lively read those messages, she responded enthusiastically, telling Hoover the comments made her extremely happy and that she couldn't stop rereading them. Their tone in the conversation almost resembled two close friends celebrating each other's work. Lively expressed relief that Hoover had connected with Josh Greenstein and emphasized how important he had become during the filmmaking process, describing him as someone she trusted and relied on heavily. The conversation then shifted into discussing detailed notes about the film. Hoover said she had highlighted sections of her feedback and wanted to show how much positive feedback there was, while Lively joked about reading through the comments as they came in. At several moments, the tone between them sounded almost like excited live reactions to each other's messages, with both of them responding instantly to particular lines or observations. But buried inside those friendly exchanges was another topic that would later raise eyebrows: film credits and posters. At one point, the discussion turned to how Justin Baldoni's name appeared in the film's promotional material and credits, including the idea of a film by credit. That phrase carries a specific meaning in filmmaking. Traditionally, it's associated with directors who are seen as the primary creative force behind a project, often called auteur filmmakers, who shape the entire vision of the movie. Blake Lively reportedly questioned whether Baldoni deserved that type of credit, suggesting it should not be used in this case. Yet the argument around that credit is complicated because Baldoni was the person who originally pursued the adaptation and pushed to turn the novel into a film project in the first place. Even though the story came from Hoover's book, the decision to bring it to the screen and the development of the project were largely connected to him. And that disagreement about recognition, who deserved credit, whose name should appear where, and how the project should be presented publicly, was only the beginning of a much larger debate that would soon spill far beyond private texts. As the conversation between Blake Lively and Colleen Hoover continued, the tone stayed friendly, but the subject matter started drifting into something more revealing about the power dynamics surrounding the film. The two began discussing promotional materials, including how Justin Baldoni was being presented in the movie's marketing and credits. At one point, the topic of Baldoni's name appearing multiple times came up, his name, his image, and the possibility of a film buy credit attached to the project. In the film industry, a film buy credit carries a certain weight. It's traditionally associated with directors who are seen as the singular creative voice behind a movie. The phrase itself became popular among European auteur filmmakers and later spread to Hollywood, where it's sometimes used to signal that the director had major influence over every aspect of the production. Technically speaking, Justin Baldoni could have argued for that type of credit. Even though the story originated from Colleen Hoover's novel, he was the one who pursued adapting the book into a film and worked to bring the project to life on screen. But in the messages being discussed online, Blake Lively appeared skeptical about the idea. Instead of treating the credit as something that naturally belonged to the director, the conversation framed it as something questionable or excessive. The implication was that Baldoni wanting a stronger presence in the film's credits or marketing might be inappropriate or unnecessary. That perspective quickly gained support from Hoover in the conversation. At another point in the exchange, they began discussing the movie's poster. The poster originally included multiple people involved in the film, but Hoover reportedly made a surprising comment, suggesting that the poster should feature only Blake Lively. The remark sounded almost like a moment of enthusiastic support from the author toward the actress leading the adaptation. The suggestion might have been casual, but it carried an interesting undertone. Movie posters are carefully negotiated pieces of marketing, and who appears on them and how prominently can become a sensitive issue. Actors, directors, and studios often negotiate placement, image size, and billing order because those details influence how audiences perceive the film and its stars. That's why another part of the conversation caught attention as well. While discussing these issues, Blake Lively reportedly claimed that she didn't really care about poster placement or billing order. She said she normally doesn't worry about things like whose name appears first or whose credit is larger. In the moment, the comment sounded modest, almost like she was trying to downplay the importance of recognition and hierarchy in film marketing. But critics of the situation quickly pointed out something that made that statement seem contradictory. Not long after these messages, within the following year, Blake Lively was promoting another movie titled Another Simple Favor, where she starred alongside Anna Kendrick. When promotional materials for that film appeared, many people online noticed something unusual about the poster design. Anna Kendrick's name still appeared first, but Blake Lively's name was placed higher and visually more prominent in the layout. For fans and entertainment observers, that detail didn't go unnoticed. Billing placement in movie posters is almost never accidental. The order, size, and position of names are usually negotiated in contracts before marketing materials are released. Because of that, many people assumed the layout was intentional and had likely been negotiated during production. That observation created an awkward contrast with the earlier claim that she didn't care about billing placement. If billing truly didn't matter, critics wondered why such a specific arrangement would appear in the poster for a different project. While nothing was officially confirmed about negotiations behind the scenes, the visual evidence sparked speculation across social media and entertainment commentary channels. Meanwhile, the original poster for It Ends With Us had also gone through multiple concepts during development.
early versions reportedly emphasized Justin Baldoni more strongly, including his role as director and his connection to the film's creation. Eventually, however, the promotional imagery shifted toward a version that centered more heavily on Blake Lively's character and presence. Those changes may have been standard marketing decisions, or they may have reflected ongoing discussions about who should be positioned as the face of the project. Either way, the text messages between Lively and Hoover suddenly started to look less like casual conversation and more like a small glimpse into the kinds of debates that often happen quietly behind the scenes in Hollywood. And as people continued analyzing those messages, one particular detail kept coming back into focus: Colleen Hoover's mysterious claim that there were 57 specific things she liked better about one version of the film than another. That oddly precise number became one of the most talked about parts of the entire conversation, because if those 57 differences really existed, they would reveal a lot about how the film changed during production, and possibly about the creative disagreements happening behind the scenes. But despite the curiosity surrounding that claim, the list itself has never been publicly shared. And that unanswered question would end up becoming one of the strangest mysteries tied to the entire situation.
As more people started examining the messages between Blake Lively and Colleen Hoover, one detail kept resurfacing again and again: that strangely specific claim about 57 things. Hoover had told Lively that after watching different versions of the film side by side, she had identified 57 separate elements she believed worked better in the version associated with Lively's creative influence. It was such an exact number that it immediately caught attention. If someone casually says they liked a lot of things or several changes, that sounds normal. But saying there were precisely 57 improvements makes it sound like there was an actual list somewhere. Naturally, people began wondering what those 57 points actually were. Were they changes in dialogue, differences in editing, adjustments to character development, or were they simply minor stylistic preferences that felt significant in the moment but wouldn't matter much to audiences? Because the messages only mentioned the number without explaining the details, the claim quickly became one of the most talked about aspects of the entire situation. From the outside, the idea of watching two different edits of a film isn't unusual. During post-production, movies often go through several cuts as directors, producers, and studio executives shape the final version. Sometimes scenes are removed, pacing is changed, or entire sequences are restructured. In major productions, these decisions can involve many voices, and disagreements about which version works best are fairly common. But what made this case unusual was how the conversation between Hoover and Lively appeared to frame the comparison. Hoover's enthusiasm for one version and her suggestion that it was significantly better created the impression that creative opinions might have been shifting around the project. Without seeing the edits themselves, it's impossible to know what those differences actually looked like on screen. Still, the curiosity hasn't faded. People who followed the discussion online keep returning to the same question. If there really were 57 improvements, what exactly were they? Were they big storytelling changes or small technical tweaks? And more importantly, who ultimately decided which version of the film audiences would see? Another reason the messages gained attention is the broader context surrounding the film's development. Justin Baldoni had originally taken the initiative to adapt It Ends With Us for the screen, and his involvement helped transform the book into a major Hollywood production. Without that early push to develop the project, the adaptation might never have happened at all. Because of that, some observers felt the conversations about credits, posters, and creative control raised complicated questions about recognition and influence within the production. At the same time, it's also true that large film adaptations often involve shifting creative roles as projects grow. Actors can become producers, authors may provide feedback, and studios frequently weigh in on final edits. What begins as one person's vision can gradually turn into a collaborative effort shaped by many different voices. That's why the leaked messages sparked such a wide range of reactions. Some people saw them as harmless conversations between collaborators celebrating their work. Others interpreted them as evidence of behind-the-scenes tension about credit, marketing, and creative authority. Without full context, it's difficult to know exactly where the truth lies. What remains undeniable, though, is how one small detail from a private conversation ended up becoming the focal point of public curiosity. Out of everything discussed in those texts, posters, billing order, film credits, and edits, the thing that continues to intrigue people the most is still that unexplained list, the mysterious 57 things. Because if that list truly exists somewhere, it could reveal a lot about how the film evolved during production and how the people involved saw the project differently at various stages. Until then, the number remains more of a curiosity than a confirmed explanation, but in a story already filled with speculation and shifting narratives, sometimes it's the smallest detail that ends up leaving the biggest question unanswered. And that's the strange reality behind one of the most talked about conversations connected to the making of It Ends With Us.